It's a late night drive in the mid 1990s, and depending on who you are, you're probably listening to Green Day or TLC, or maybe Biggie on your car's tape deck. You're on a quiet suburban road when you notice an oncoming car with its headlights off. In that era of gang panic, many people heard a terrifying warning: don't flash your lights at that car. According to the rumor, this was part of a gang initiation game. A prospective member drives with his lights out, and the first Good Samaritan to blink their high beams is marked for elimination. This gruesome tale spread fear across the United States, tapping into the anxieties of a decade preoccupied with gang violence and random crime. The Headlight gang initiation legend didn't arise overnight. It evolved over years before hitting the mainstream. Folklorists traced its roots to the early 1980s, when an outlaw biker gang like the Hells Angels was rumored to be initiating recruits with this deadly lights-out ploy. By the mid-1980s, the story had shifted to urban street gangs. It was now the Latin Kings or the Bloods or the Crips targeting these Good Samaritans. The tale spread by word of mouth for years until new technology gave it a boost. In 1993, a bogus police bulletin spread via fax warned of a violent gang initiation weekend involving headlight traps. Some law enforcement agencies, deceived by the official-looking memo, even issued public alerts of their own before realizing the hoax. However, by that time it was too late, and the myth snowballed, and what began as local hearsay had exploded into a nationwide urban legend. By the late 1990s, the Headlight Initiation scare was making headlines and creeping into nightly newscasts. Panicked citizens were calling police and news outlets for answers. Trashy daytime tabloid talk shows like Ricky Lake and Jenny Jones talked about the topic as if it were real, spreading even greater fear, as was the style at the time. Amid this frenzy, a real-life tragedy seemed to confirm the worst fears. In the early 90s, 29-year-old Kelly Freed was shot after the car she was in flashed its headlights at another vehicle that had its lights off. The teenage shooters weren't acting out any gang right, and they later said they irrationally took the headlight flash as a personal insult. That said, this very real incident eerily mirrored the legend's premise, blurring the line between rumor and reality. To an anxious public, this case made the lights-out warning feel frighteningly plausible. It's necessary to examine why this urban legend took root, despite having little basis in reality beyond some unconnected incidents. The answer lies in the social climate and psychology of the 1990s. High-profile gang crime coverage fueled a perception that danger lurked everywhere. Many people felt a random gang attack could happen to anyone, even in suburbia. In fact, according to local news broadcasts in the 90s, perhaps the most dangerous place to be when it came to gang violence was your seemingly safe suburban home. The headlight flashing legend tapped directly into that fear. It was the idea that even a small act of courtesy could get you cut down by violent gang members invading your suburban haven. Throughout the 1990s and beyond, authorities struggled to extinguish the lights-out myth with facts. Despite having played a large role in the perpetuation of the myth, law enforcement was the first to try to shut it down as well. Police departments nationwide affirmed they couldn't find a single documented instance of gangs blasting drivers for flashing their headlights. Perhaps the greatest reassurances came from cops who specialized in anti-gang activity. These gang experts stressed that real initiation rites rarely involve random targets, simply because this would bring extreme heat to any criminal organization. Recruits are typically jumped in by surviving a beating or tasked with crimes that further the organization. What they are not told to do is to invite a potential statewide or even nationwide manhunt by shooting an innocent motorist for no reason whatsoever. Interestingly, in later years, Many current and former gang members also came out to say the entire thing was bogus. Again, they emphasized that these activities would draw significant heat from law enforcement, which could get the whole organization arrested. Further, they also emphasized that street gangs are often ultimately controlled by much more dangerous and powerful prison gangs and organized crime groups. These groups thrive partly because of their ability to maintain some degree of order amongst street-level operatives. Despite all the debunking, the Headlight Initiation myth has never fully died out. Each new communications medium has given it fresh life, from photocopied flyers and faxes to email chain letters and now social media posts. As recently as this decade, authorities and fact-checkers have had to refute viral posts, reviving the old warning for a new generation. Late one night, a teenager is babysitting in a sprawling upscale home. The children are fast asleep upstairs, and the house is still, and to pass the time, the babysitter sits down to watch TV. But in the corner of the room stands a life-sized clown statue, silent and eerie. Its painted eyes seem to follow her, and at first she tries to ignore the unsettling decoration, but her unease grows with every glance. Eventually, the babysitter can't shake the feeling that something is very wrong. Overwhelmed by the statue's creepy presence, she decides to call the parents and ask permission to watch TV in their bedroom. What happens next is the classic twist that has made the clown statue an infamous urban legend. On the other end of the line, the father falls silent. Then, in a panicked tone, he tells the babysitter, "We don't have a clown statue." The babysitter's blood runs cold as the father says, "Get the kids and get out of the house." Heart pounding, the babysitter drops the phone and races to gather the children. Clutching the sleepy youngsters, she flees the house and calls the police from a neighbor's home. Moments later, she witnesses a terrifying sight, a pale, painted face peeking from the upstairs window, then vanishing back into the darkness. When police arrive and sweep the house, the horrifying truth is revealed. They arrest a man in a clown costume hiding on the property. In some tellings, he is a wanted serial predator or perhaps an escaped mental patient armed with a knife. In others, he's a disturbed homeless person who somehow slipped inside and survived by sneaking food, only to pose as a lifeless doll whenever someone was nearby. In the darkest versions of the tale, the story ends in bloodshed. The clown slays the babysitter before fleeing into the night. But in most recountings, thanks to the babysitter's phone call, her and the children are saved from a fate that could have been unimaginably grim. This vivid scenario has all the ingredients of a modern campfire story. An ordinary home turned into a house of horrors, a creepy clown figure corrupted into a real predator, and a twist ending that leaves listeners with goosebumps. It's no wonder that many who hear the babysitter and the clown statue story find it hauntingly memorable. Some even believe for a time that it might be true, but it's not a documented real incident. In reality, the creepy clown statue is just an urban myth, one so pervasive that it's often presented as a true story. The clown statue legend is a relatively recent addition to the pantheon of urban lore. Folklorists and fact-checkers note that it first began circulating in the early 2000s, though I'll get to its potentially older roots in a moment. Unlike classic legends passed on by word of mouth over generations, this story found life in the age of the internet. In fact, it appears to have started as a chain email or online message around 2004, which urged readers to forward the tale to others. The chain email would almost always include a variant of a phrase saying that you would be responsible for the next attack if you didn't forward it on. This kind of curse was a common hallmark of chain letters and early internet ghost stories, designed to give the legend a sense of urgency and interactive fear. Unsurprisingly, this tactic worked. The story spread rapidly through email inboxes and forum posts, picking up new embellishments along the way. That said, some believe that the story is rooted in an older urban legend and is actually a modern retelling of it, with a coat of white face paint and a red nose attached. These folklorists observe that it's essentially a modern offshoot of the babysitter and the man upstairs legend. This is the classic tale dating back to at least the 1960s, in which a babysitter is terrorized by an unknown caller who, famously, turns out to be calling from inside the house. Both stories follow a very similar blueprint. A young person alone with children, a false sense of security shattered by a revelation that the threat's close by, and the theme of an ordinary night turning into a nightmare. The clown statue legend swaps out the telephone stalker for a clown in disguise, but the core fear, an intruder hiding where you least expect, remains the same. In the 21st century retelling, the intruder isn't merely on another phone line in the house. He's right there in the room, perhaps taking inspiration from modern horror films and our visual culture of fear. Urban legends persist not just because they're told often, but because they tap into primal human fears. Coulrophobia, the fear of clowns, is one of the most common phobias out there, and even those who wouldn't call it a phobia often find clowns a bit unsettling. Moreover, the clown statue legend plays on the fear of hidden intruders and violated sanctuaries. Our homes are supposed to be safe spaces, and the thought that someone could be hiding within our house, watching us, biding their time, is the stuff of nightmares. There are, of course, real cases like this, where an intruder lives in a house, which are amongst the most disturbing cases imaginable. This legend brilliantly combines two fears, the uncanny fear many people have of clowns, and the very real fear of a home invasion. Further, it reminds us of the first times we were home alone, as the babysitter is young and naturally a bit scared by being alone. On a moonlit night in Lafayette, Colorado, you might hear whispers of a vampire lurking in the local cemetery. For decades, locals and curious visitors have been drawn to a particular grave, a grave marked by a weathered headstone and a gnarled tree said to have sprouted from the heart of a vampire. According to legend, a Transylvania-born miner buried here didn't rest in peace. He allegedly rose from the grave with glowing red eyes, prowling among the tombstones at night. The man behind the legend was Todor Glava, a Romanian immigrant from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. According to contemporary accounts, he was working as a coal miner and attempting to save up to bring his wife over to America when he died in 1918. Glava was laid to rest in Lafayette's municipal cemetery, and his modest gravestone was crudely carved with his name, the year 1918, and his birthplace, Transylvania. He was even buried beside another Romanian miner, John Trandafir, who died in the same year, and the two men's names share a single headstone. At the time, Transylvania was already famous as the setting of Bram Stoker's Dracula, so that eerie inscription didn't go unnoticed. It wasn't until decades later that whispers of a vampire in Lafayette began to stir. By the 1950s, local parents were reportedly invoking the Lafayette vampire as a boogeyman to keep their children from staying out too late. If you didn't get home by dark, the vampire in the cemetery would get you. Fueled by this fascination, local teenagers and storytellers in the 50s and 60s likely embellished Glava's story even further. After all, a pale, lanky outsider from Transylvania made the perfect candidate for a ghost story in a small Colorado town. Over the years, the legend of the Lafayette vampire grew more elaborate with each telling. The most common version goes like this. Glava was an unnaturally tall, pale man who aroused suspicion among his neighbors. When he died in 1918, some locals weren't convinced he would stay gone. In whispers, they claimed a group of fearful townsfolk dug up his coffin to check the body. Supposedly, they found blood on his lips, unusually sharp teeth, and nails still growing, obvious signs that Lafayette had a vampire on its hands. Panicking, the townsfolk drove a wooden stake through Glava's heart to ensure he never rose again, then hastily reburied him. According to legend, that wooden stake took root and grew into a hardy juniper tree right out of Glava's grave. Indeed, even today a gnarled tree stands directly atop the burial site, unlike any other tree placement in that part of the cemetery. The tale also insists that Glava's fingernails continued to grow underground, emerging as thorny rose brambles that once covered the grave. For decades, a wild rose bush entwined the grave site, and its flowers were described in ghost stories as blood-red blooms nourished by the vampire's blood. Other contemporary reports say that the roses were yellow, which doesn't hit quite the same way when it comes to building up a vampire legend. In later years, imaginative new details were added to the tale. One account spun a yarn about Glava being cursed by a wolf's bite, slaying his wife, and ultimately getting cornered in a barn and staked by a neighbor. This is despite the fact that all contemporary evidence indicates that his wife was still residing in Austria-Hungary when he perished. Also, this puts aside the obvious absurdity of someone being transformed into a vampire by a wolf bite. It's like someone got some of the lore mixed up. Despite all the spooky lore, historical evidence paints a much more mundane picture. Todor Glava wasn't an undead fiend at all, but a victim of the Spanish flu. He fell ill and died, and his body was embalmed and buried within 2 days of death. Despite the apparently unusual nature of the man, the locals at the time didn't seriously believe he was a vampire, and no hysteria took hold. Today, the Lafayette vampire is considered one of Colorado's most obscure urban legends. For Glava himself, a man who died far away from his loved ones and homeland, the legend has granted a kind of immortality, ensuring his grave is never forgotten. In the end, the Lafayette vampire legend is a curious blend of fact and fiction, the tale of a mortal man transformed into a myth, simply because he was from a place deemed to be creepy. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, don't forget to check out my podcast, Lazy Chill True Crime, by searching wherever you get your podcasts. Also, quick reminder that there's a merch store where you can get some sweet loot. You're browsing the internet, minding your own business, maybe researching local pizza joints, or watching a video about the top 4 spookiest vacuum cleaners in Vermont. Suddenly, like a mirage in the desert, an advertisement appears. Hot singles in your area are waiting to meet you. If you know this feeling, you've been struck by the siren song of the digital age. Who are they? Do they really live in your area? And why are they always waiting around for you in particular? Of course, no one has ever confirmed meeting one of these mythical singles. Like Bigfoot or the perfectly ripe avocado at the grocery store, they exist more in theory than in practice. Still, the legend endures. It's become a meme, a joke, a warning, passed down like an oral tradition, whispered from one generation of internet users to the next. Beware the hot singles, for they want your mother's maiden name and date of birth before chatting, we tell each other, like old sea captains warning of sirens on the rocks. In the end, we know they're not real, but deep down, maybe we prefer to believe we live in a world where even in a desolate Alaska cabin, We're surrounded by hot singles in a 3-mile radius. Deep in the forests of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, whispers tell of a creature with the head of a dog and the torso or body of a man. Allegedly 7 feet tall with piercing blue or glowing amber eyes, this beast unleashes a chilling howl that sounds almost human, despite being clearly animal-like. It has reportedly been seen mostly in the state's northwestern counties. Locals call it the Michigan Dogman, an urban legend that has captivated and unnerved people for generations. The tale of the Dogman is both engaging and mysterious, rooted in frontier-era folklore yet revived in modern times. The earliest recorded Dogman sighting dates back to 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, where 2 lumberjacks reported a creature with a man's body and a dog's head. According to lore, the Dogman appears in a cycle every 10 years, always in years ending in 7, though this pattern is unconfirmed. Throughout the early 20th century, sporadic reports continued. In 1937, a man in Paris, Michigan, claimed he was attacked by several dogs, and that one stood up on 2 legs and glared at him, staring directly into his soul. Similar encounters were reported in Allegan County in the 1950s and near Cross Village in 1967. Many of these early accounts came from remote logging camps and rural farmsteads, settings where isolation helped the legend take root. For most of the 20th century, the Dogman remained a relatively obscure piece of local lore until a single radio broadcast brought it back into the spotlight. In 1987, disc jockey Steve Cook, who worked at a country music station in Traverse City, decided to produce an April Fool's Day prank that would become the stuff of legend. Cook wrote and recorded a ballad called The Legend, spinning a spooky poem about a creature lurking in Michigan, based on a mix of local myths and his own imagination. Cook intended it as a fun Halloween-style tall tale, but when he played it on air, the response was anything but a joke. The station was flooded with calls from listeners who swore the beast in the song wasn't fictional. Many claimed they themselves, or someone they knew, had encountered a towering wolf-like creature in real life. The legend became an instant hit, and within weeks it was the most requested song on the station. Cook was astonished to receive dozens of letters and tapes recounting supposed Dogman sightings, some dating back decades. Capitalizing on the interest, he sold cassette copies of the song and even added new verses in later versions as fresh reports rolled in. And according to the accounts, he donated the proceeds from the unexpected hit to local Michigan charities. So yeah, let's have a quick round of applause for Steve Cook, both for reviving the Dogman legend and being so generous with the windfall. Over the years, Dogman encounters have shared striking similarities. Witnesses often describe driving down an isolated road or camping deep in the woods when a tall, shaggy figure suddenly emerges from the darkness. The creature might leap in front of a vehicle or scratch on a cabin door before vanishing into the night. Each story, whether from a 1960s farmhouse or a 21st century highway, adds another thread to the Dogman's legend, keeping locals cautious and the legend alive. Cryptozoologists believe the Dogman might be a genuine unknown species, essentially a real-life wolf that has some features in common with mythical werewolves. They point to the consistency of eyewitness descriptions and draw parallels to similar Wolfman legends, like Wisconsin's Beast of Bray Road. Believers also note that Michigan's wilderness still holds surprises. For instance, cougars were long thought absent in the state until recent years, when sightings confirmed they had returned. While official estimates indicate that there's only about 100 cougars in Michigan at present, anyone who's been out to a bar in Michigan knows that number has to be way off. Others believe that the Michigan Dogman could be a spiritual entity associated with Native American legend. The Ojibwe speak of malevolent spirits, which can take the form of monstrous animal-like creatures. Given the disturbing nature of these creatures, this has been suggested as a possible explanation for the Dogman. Other theories based in Native American lore focus on the idea of what I'll generally call skinwalkers. Proper skinwalkers come from Navajo tradition, but the concept remains similar. It's an entity that can change into a horrific beast. Or hey, maybe it's just a good old-fashioned old world werewolf hanging out in Michigan, perhaps on vacation. Skeptics, however, see the Dogman as pure urban legend. They note that Steve Cook's viral 1987 song essentially fabricated the modern legend from older tales, a case study in how a good story can snowball. Many supposed sightings can be explained away as misidentifications, with bear misidentifications being a common explanation. A bear standing on its hind legs in the dusk could easily be mistaken for a hairy bipedal monster. People are generally unfamiliar with the ability of bears to stand on their hind legs for extended periods of time, and also walk rather quickly as well. Also, I know some of you are waiting for me to suggest an owl misidentification here, but yeah, it ain't happening this time around. No tangible evidence, bones, tracks, or clear photos, has ever been found to support the Dogman's existence. Further, at least one popular home video, which was provided as proof, was later found to be a hoax. In the midst of suburban Edmond, Oklahoma, tucked behind quiet neighborhoods and ordinary strip malls, lies a patch of overgrown woodland hiding a bizarre secret. Locals whisper that beyond the rusted gate and no trespassing signs are the ruins of an abandoned circus. Imagine walking through tall grass and finding old animal cages, weather-beaten circus trailers, and even a collapsed big-top skeleton. According to legend, this is Gandini's Circus, a once thriving traveling show from the early 20th century that met a mysterious, eerie end. The urban legend of Gandini's Circus paints a vivid and chilling picture. It's said that the circus began touring in the early 1900s, bringing exotic animals and dazzling acts to towns across America. The circus supposedly shut down during the Great Depression, its fortunes lost and its tents abruptly folded for the last time. But unlike most circuses that simply fade away, this one left behind a ghostly imprint. Stories claim that the circus camp on the outskirts of Oklahoma City was abandoned in haste. Visitors to the site recount finding remnants of that era, with charred and burned-out trailers where clowns and carnies once slept. It's as if the echoes of laughter and music got trapped in time, turning the place into an accidental time capsule of a bygone show. What makes Gandini's Circus especially spooky, however, are the tales of sinister occurrences woven into its lore. Over the years, imaginative storytellers have added increasingly eerie elements. In some retellings, evil clowns supposedly prowled these grounds, and a wicked ringmaster is said to have kidnapped people and committed horrors during the circus's last days. Other accounts speak of unfortunate ends for those connected to the circus. Clowns dying in darkly comedic ways, animals left to perish, and the freak show members meeting gruesome fates on the property at the hands of that evil ringmaster. These grisly details are completely unverified, but they amplify the legend's creepiness. The most supernatural versions claim that ghostly apparitions now linger at the old camp. People who dare sneak in at night have reported seeing shadowy figures among the trees and floating spirits roaming the field. Some are human-shaped, while others resemble phantom lions or elephants. Behind the chilling folklore, there are kernels of truth and a fascinating real history that likely gave rise to the circus legend. The physical location is very real, an empty wooded lot in Edmond that indeed holds the remains of a circus winter camp. Throughout the mid-20th century, this property was used as the off-season home for traveling circuses, a place to keep animals and equipment during the winter months. Historical research shows that a man named Howard Seuss acquired a defunct circus's assets in 1943 and established the Clyde Brothers Circus, an indoor arena show. This was successful, and he later acquired the Hagen Brothers Circus, a traditional tented show with animals and other circus attractions that were common at the time. Both circuses made this Oklahoma camp their winter headquarters, housing a menagerie of animals and some performers. By 1976, the circuses had been sold off, and the site, along with its cages, barns, and trailers, was simply left to deteriorate. Overgrown and abandoned for decades, it's easy to see how such a place could spur wild stories. Yet, crucially, researchers have never found any evidence that a circus named Gondini's Circus ever really existed as an official company. A local historian combed through records and turned up nothing on a Gondini troupe. This suggests the name and much of the legend were likely concocted after the fact, perhaps by adventurous locals or imaginative trespassers trying to explain the uncanny ruins. The name Gondini has an old-world ring to it that makes the myth feel believable, even if it's fictitious. Despite the actual truth being obscured, the tale has enough to it to make it a highly interesting urban legend.